Hey guys, hope you are all having a great day. Today I want to talk in depth and great detail about what is going on in Russia. I see a lot of people lost and confused, and I aim to bring some much needed due diligence as to the affairs taking place in Europe. Nothing of significance took place today. US markets continued sliding down after economic sanctions on Russia spurred that big sell-off, pushing S&P 500 into full correction territory. The Dow Jones actually bounced up this morning more than 200 points before turning bearish and sinking after Ukraine announced plans for a 30-day state of emergency as it prepares for an invasion, urging its citizens to leave Russia. All three benchmarks opened highest after reports came out saying Russia remained open to diplomatic solutions, though officials keep saying this is just a ruse. Stocks are trying to rally on pretty much anything positive at this point. The markets are severely down, and any little news that shows any hope easily have stocks move up, but these are only temporary. Today we are going to be talking about the stock market as a whole, since that is where most of the eyes are and what will be dictating where GME and AMC will move in the following days and weeks. Before we start, let me quickly state that I am not a financial advisor, and that all content discussed in this channel is simply information gathered that I deem important for people to know, so that they can make informed decisions. All efforts are aimed to better understand the nature of the current market in anticipation of the greatest squeeze in financial history. Let's dive right in. So before we talk about markets, let's talk about Russia and Ukraine as whole. I think that above all that is happening, we need truly understand what Russia really wants in Ukraine. I have been reading pretty much every article out there and interviews with experts on the situation enough to come to a variety of conclusions. What Russia wants from Ukraine is simple. They want to restore the status quo before 2014. You see, even since the independence of Ukraine in 1991, the existing regiment saw its primary goal as to make sure Moscow is happy and not to seem all too threatening to Russian interests. They were there to appease the government, but that all changed in 2014, under circumstances that Russia perceived as inappropriate meddling by the United States and Europe in the domestic affairs of Ukraine. Moscow wants Ukraine to go back to the status quo pre-2014. And they want Ukrainians to do it all on their own. They don't want to impose a regime by force, but rather persuade Ukrainians to think they really have no choice in the matter. But Russia has bigger objectives than this, something that I gravely underestimated in my previous analysis of the situation since I was measuring the situation solely from an economic perspective. Russia wants to create havoc and discord within Europe itself, and most importantly, embarrass the United States by making them seem ineffective in their attempts to stop them. The mentality of Moscow in all of this is that they perceived the treatment by Western countries as exploitative and harmful back in the 1990s, something that we on our side only viewed it as us exposing them to the advantages of democratic politics and an open economy. They are bitter and carry resentment over that, which is why they are so intolerant of talks of pacification. And this takes us to the main question, which is compromise likely to happen? The difficulty of the situation is that Russia's actions can easily put everyone on the path of not having control over anything. They recognize that, we recognize that, but yet here we are. So what is the likeliest thing to happen? Well, I still believed an all-out war is not going to happen, because again, from the mentality of Russians themselves, they do not want to invade Ukraine. They want to scare them to hell into changing stances, and they will not back down until they do. There is little chance that Russia will change the government structure of the country, but I think there is plenty of room to believe that new settlements and changes in policy and orientation will be made. The big goal here, however, which is sadly the least talked about aspect of all this in the corporate media, is the resolution Russia seeks. They will want a solution that will allow them to remain in Ukraine, and enjoy a special constitutional status, which would also grant them the ability to veto rights over fundamental changes in the Ukrainian order. This will essentially make it impossible for Ukraine to ever join NATO, but allow them to remain how they have been all these decades. A sovereign state, but with the needed approval of Russia to do anything. Annexation of the state in the future can't be put off the list, but it is less likely to happen right now. Again, this would give Russia the peace that they need, embarrass the West as an incompetent force that are powerless to stop Russia from getting what they want, and give Putin some brownie points in the face of the oligarchs in his country. Now let's talk about the outcomes at last from all of this. The United States is being very loud and vocal about Russia, with the corporate media playing to the agenda of instilling war-mongering sentiment 24/7 on news coverage. I think this was a grave mistake, because the United States has very little leverage in the situation. All we have is a big mouth and the ability to supply Ukraine with weapons and placing sanctions, but even those come with a limit, so let me explain. The US has been placing sanctions, blocking exports of oil and gas, cutting Russia off the banking system, the international banking system, and then also targeting wealthy and powerful families and firms in Russia to create internal pressure. Of all these steps, which not all have been implemented yet, as some remain as options in case Russia does decide to invade indeed, the one that the United States could have most difficulty with is getting the British to go along with them. Believe it or not, the British service economy is very dependent on Russia as well, which provides litigation in courts for disputes among Russian business leaders. It would be a very large stretch to assume the UK will simply let all this power and leverage for the sake of trying to present themselves as a threat to Russia when they know their hands are tied behind their back. Again, Ukraine is not part of NATO, and it would be hard to imagine them being in the short term as well. NATO can supply and bolster their power, but they cannot intervene directly. That is the outlook of the entire situation as it stands, and I hope it makes sense to you guys. Can Russia invade and begin a war with Ukraine? Absolutely. At that point, things quickly get out of control and it will be impossible to determine a course of action and how things will pan out. If we don't go to war, and Russia is effective in scaring Ukraine into giving in to their demands, then the US and the West will look really bad, ineffective, and Russia wins big time. However, it will also save the US markets. I think if Russia does invade, there is a good chance that the stock markets in the world collapse and we crash. I want to quickly thank Russian expert Paul B. Stefan, who works at the University of Virginia School of Law as a professor, for his expertise. He previously worked as a CIA analyst, taught Soviet law, helped Russia design its tax systems after the Cold War, and has a numerous amount of experience embedded in his resume. His interviews on this situation were very bright and enlightening, and I thank him dearly for his contributions to my understanding, which I have just shared with you. Now that we are up to speed with everything going on, let's talk about markets. I want to essentially reiterate the points I said yesterday. I think investors are a very panicky and overreactive bunch, but as we have contended with bad situations after bad situations throughout 2022 so far, we had found it easier to hand on. This is why we have actually opened to small little rallies. We are in a bear market, but we retain a bullish stance on things. Investors are confident in the longevity of positive growth, especially after the rate hikes come in and the situation in Ukraine settles. America has little to no economic exposure in the affairs taking place, and because of that, our market is due to rally the strongest. We are just experiencing little bursts of panic attacks in the process, which if it worsens with an actual war, we could easily sink down, but if we don't, we are likely to remain trading at these low levels until things pan out. I remain bullish, buying the dip and diversifying my portfolio to plays I feel have the biggest upside upon resolution of current affairs. Most of those profits will be placed back in meme stocks in the end, strengthening my position more than ever. I look at current circumstances as the best opportunity to add super cheap. For months, we complained about prices being too high, and now that they are low, I see some people scared that it's over. I guess in the end you cannot please everyone, so I will just please myself buying as much as I can. Let's now talk about today. The Fed submitted over $1.738 trillion in reverse repo operations today. Dark pool trades for AMC accounted for 52% of the total volume today, while dark pool trades for GameStop accounted for 48% of the total volume today. AMC had a larger amount of buy orders than sell orders, with GameStop also having a larger amount of buy orders than sell orders. Now, let's talk about performance. AMC had a bearish performance, losing over 4% for the day. It began trading with a bump up in the pre-market, but as time progressed, AMC started testing and breaking support, staying underneath the VWAP for the most part. Upon market opening, there was a lot of volatility, but shorters really dragged the stock down from 17 to 15.83. AMC began bouncing up, eventually testing the VWAP but was unable to break it, so it fell again, this time reaching 15.62, the lowest point of the day. After this dip, AMC began moving up, surpassing 16 again, but retracing back down to a closing price at 15.73, below the VWAP. AMC will find support at 15.62, 14.75 and 14.36. Resistance will be met at 16, 16.35 and 16.80. It's hard to anticipate movement when the whole market is so volatile and easily reacting to all news coming in. GameStop traded bearishly, losing over 2% for the day. It opened to a small volatile session before beginning to dip, eventually breaking under 117. After this dip, GME began bouncing up, passing 121 again and then falling back down. It continued breaking support all the rest of the day, closing at 114.87, below the VWAP. GameStop will find support at 109.28, 107 and 104. Resistance will be met at 117, 121 and 126. Again, remember to stay zen and open to any changes because right now, everything is hanging on the thread of news. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. That is all I have for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And most importantly, remember to come join my Discord. If you want to support this channel, I have a Patreon link in the description as well as some one-time donation links for Cash App and PayPal. Thank you again for being a part of this channel. I will continue striving for better content. Enjoy the rest of your day. Keep on buying the dip and to the moon.